Today, we're going to take a look at the difference between active and passive voice and how the verb expansion rule is actually used to create voices. So, in the English language, we have these two voices, both active and passive voice. So, let's talk about what makes them different. So, let's compare these two sentences. If I said, despite his insatiable appetite, Mr. Marsh was defeated by a Refton yokel in the donut eating contest, or a Refton yokel defeated Mr. Marsh despite his insatiable appetite in the donut eating contest. Well, both of these sentences are grammatically correct. The first one's written in passive voice, where I said Mr. Marsh was defeated by the yokel, or the second sentence is written in active voice, where I said a Refton yokel defeated Mr. Marsh. So let's talk about what makes these two different. So visually, I can see that the verb is different from was defeated to defeated. I can also see the order is a little bit different. From opposed to saying like Mr. Marsh was defeated, I have the yokel defeated Mr. Marsh. I can see that I've moved a little bit in the sentence from the beginning to the behind the verb. I can also see the yokel from Refton has moved from behind the verb to the front of the verb. And so that's some visual differences between active and passive voice. So in the passive voice, the subject actually is not doing anything. The subject actually receives the action. So think about the word passive, which means that you're not doing anything. So in this case, I'm not doing anything. Something's being done to me. So Mr. Marsh was defeated by the Refton yokel. So I was kind of something was being done to me, which is oftentimes the opposite way that we think that the subject of the sentence is the one who actually does the action. And so we call this a passive sentence because the subject isn't doing anything. He's being very passive. Some people would say that it's incorrect, and that itself is incorrect. No, the passive voice is not wrong, and it should never be told that you're wrong when you use the passive voice. Now, you might have a teacher who says that he or she doesn't want you to use the passive voice, but it's never wrong, and you should never lose points for using the passive voice unless you were told not to use it. But it's not grammatically incorrect. It's a stylistic choice, and sometimes you should use the passive voice. We use it a lot as in terms of science. When we write lab reports, we write in passive voice. Lawyers oftentimes write in passive voice. Laws are sometimes written in passive voice. There's a number of careers that purposely need passive voice. But we also have the active voice, which is oftentimes looked at as a better sentence because it's stronger. And it's true, it's often a stronger sentence because the subject is actually doing something. The Refton yokel defeated Mr. Marsh, but it's not any more correct than the other. It's just a stylistic choice. In this case, in the active voice, the subject is actively doing something. The yokel is defeating me. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on when we create the passive in the active voice and how we're going to use the verb expansion rule to create that. So if I had the active voice, which was carnival trolls attacked us, well, the trolls are the ones who are attacking us. When I change it to passive voice, I would say we were attacked by carnival trolls. I like this because it's real simple and you can kind of see the movement of the sentence where attacked turned into were attacked. And one thing I want you to notice is that the verb has increased by one. When I go from active to passive, the verb's always going to get bigger by one. Another thing you're going to notice is that there's almost a crisscrossing of motion, that what was at the back is at the front and what's at the front was at the back. The carnival trolls got kicked to the back of the sentence, and we gets kicked to the from the front of the sentence gets kicked to the back and turns into the word us, or us gets pushed to the front and turns into a we, depending, I guess, on which way you're looking at it. But we can kind of see that the beginning and the end kind of get switched around, but the verb increases by one. Now, when I build another one, if I said the truth was known around the school about Mr. Marsh's addiction to donuts, one of the coolest things about the passive voice is the passive voice sometimes will hide who actually is the person who, or the actual subject itself. So in the original one above there, you can see the carnival trolls are the ones who are doing the action. But when I take the sentence which says the truth was known around the school, and I change this passive voice back into active voice, well, when I change it, I could say something like, everyone around the school knew the truth about Mr. Marsh's addiction to donuts. You'll notice once again the verb has changed. It's gone from two words, was known, to one word, knew. And once again, that's going to be very common that we go from active to passive, we increase it by one. And then when you go backwards from passive to active, you lose a verb. What's also unique is the fact that in the passive sentence, the truth got kicked to the back of the sentence, but in the back of the sentence, there wasn't anything really moved for the front. You'll notice then when I do something in passive voice, I'll see if I can bring my pen up here for you, that the passive voice oftentimes will have a by prep phrase in it, but it doesn't have to. When I say the truth was known around the school, it didn't say by everyone or by the student body or by the teachers. It didn't say that. And what's unique about the passive voice is the passive voice sometimes can hide that. That's why it's used in law and particularly by lawyers, so we can kind of hide things that we don't really want to come out and say. Over here, it's more aggressive. Everyone around the school knew the truth. Over here, the truth was known. We just didn't really admit who actually knew it. It's kind of creative that way. But I think that's what's kind of cool about the passive voice. So the verb expansion rule actually is the active voice verb expansion rule. So this whole verb expansion rule we've been learning of tense, modal, have an en, be plus ing plus main verb is actually the active voice is a verb expansion rule. When we create the passive voice, we know when we go from active to passive that we're going to increase the verb by one. And in order for it to increase by one, we have to add something in order for it to turn into an extra verb. Otherwise, we'll just simply have the same answer if we make everything with the same mathematical equation. So you'll notice here, there's this be plus em. So in the passive voice verb expansion rule, it's exactly the same. The only thing that's different is right before the main verb, I'm going to add in be plus en. You'll notice there's no parentheses around it. Remember, parentheses means that it's optional, but the be plus en has to be there. Now, I didn't add the word been, B-E-E-N. I added be plus en. Sometimes the word been will end up being there, but I'm not literally adding the word been. I'm adding be plus en. So when I show you how we convert an active to passive voice with the verb expansion rule, maybe it'll make it a little clearer for you how we use this. So let's do some examples. We'll do a couple together, and then we'll take a look at our worksheet and do a couple on there. So let's take on maybe following. So a lot of you can probably do this in your head, and that's fine. But on your quiz, I'll ask you to be able to show me your work, almost like doing math and show me your mathematical work. So I'm going to go through the baby steps and make sure that everyone understands how I'm going to change maybe following from a 3 verb to 4 verbs. All right, so first thing I'm doing, I'm going to actually write it out as the active voice verb expansion rule. So this is the present because of the word may. It's always the tense of the very first word. Plus, and then I look for my next part, which is my modal. And my modal is may, so I write the word may. Then I look for the word have, but I don't have a form of have, so I don't use it. We know how to do that. Next, I look for an ing. When I come across the ing kind of tells me if I'm going to use the be plus ing. And here it is. There's following, so I add in be plus ing. And I'm adding be plus ing, not because it's here, but because up here it says, hey, if you have an ing, you've got to add in be plus ing. And lastly is my main verb, which is follow. So I have the present of may as may, be, and ing plus follow is maybe following. That's the active voice. We'll call him active voice like that. When I change this over into passive voice, it's the exact same thing until I get to the main verb. So once again, kind of doing it in terms of baby steps here, I'm just going to replicate it. I know it seems redundant. Follow along with me anyway. So the present of may plus be plus ing. But right before I get to that main verb follow, I'm going to add in be plus en. That's going to guarantee that I'm going to add in an extra word. And then my main verb is follow. My daughter is making some sounds downstairs. So when I glue this back together, the present of may is may. Remember, the tags always go with the next word. So be is all by himself. Ing plus be is being. And the en plus follow is followed. There's no such word as following. So the passive voice of maybe following is maybe being followed. That's the correct passive voice. Now you could say, well, couldn't was followed be passive voice? I'd say, sure. It's just not the passive voice of maybe following. You'll notice that if there's a may in the active voice, there's a may in the passive voice. If there's an ing in the active voice, there's an ing in the passive voice. It gets moved, but it's still there. I should go from 3 words to 4 words. I'm always going to increase it by 1, and that's correct. Let's do a second example. Could have been doing. All right, so once again, if you want to follow along with me, I'm going to do the baby steps. This is the past. I'm going to do the active voice first. It's the past of the word could. I'm going to do my modal next, and my modal is always written in its present tense, which is can, the past of could turns into can, or sorry, the passive can turns into could. I look for a have, and I do have a word have, so I'm going to include him. Here's have plus en. And then I'm looking for, here's an ing. So if I have an ing, I get to include be plus ing. So here's be plus ing. I told you before, people find this unit to be challenging. I think it's fun. And then lastly is my main verb, which is doing, and I'm going to turn it into do. That's my active voice. When I turn into passive, I'm going to go into past. And I don't want you ever confuse past with passive. Completely different things. Past is a tense, passive is a voice. So this is the past of can plus have plus en plus be plus ing, and then right before the main verb, I'm going to add in be plus en. Guarantees I'm going to get an extra word. And then here's do. When I glue it together, I should go from 1, 2, 3, 4 words to 5 words. The passive can is could, and that makes sense. If there's a could in the original one, active voice, there's a could in the passive voice. Here's have by himself because en goes with be. So here's could have been. All right, I'm loving all this. If there's a have in the original one, there should be a have in the next one. Here's been. ing goes with be, which is being. And en goes with do, should be done. And that's my passive voice. From could have been doing to could have been being done. You could have been doing your homework, or your homework could have been being done by you. And that's the passive voice. I'm going to pause my video, and then I'm going to do 2 more examples with you, and then we'll talk about how we make these into sentences as well. Kind of a 2-part video of just awesomeness on active and passive voice. Bling!